Good morning, everybody. I got my coffee, I got my vape. Let's talk a little. Last week, I had some really nice feedback on Facebook group about my coffee with Phil, and they mentioned how much they appreciated me talking about panic attacks. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about panic attacks themselves. But before we get started, let's take a deep breath and take a sip of coffee. I've talked a whole bunch about my journey of overcoming my social phobias. I've mentioned quite a few times in other coffees with Phil about panic attacks, but I haven't actually delved into it. I never actually talked about the importance of recognizing panic attacks and dealing with them. This was very, very important for me to ever begin to be able to overcome phobias. So let's talk about it. MayoClinic.org has a lot to say about panic attacks. They define it as a sudden episode of intense fear that triggers several physical reactions where there is no real danger or apparent cause. They go on to say that many people only have like 1 or 2 panic attacks in their whole entire life, and that they subside when whatever kind of stress that is going on in their life subsides. But what I'm talking about is the reoccurring panic attacks. Every time you get into a certain situation or you have a certain stimulus, panic attacks kick in. Your fear kicks in. This is an irrational fear, which in my opinion is why panic attacks hurt us so much. A lot of times we don't recognize that we're actually having them. Other times when we do, we find fault with ourselves, or we try to push through it and it makes it worse, or we actually run from it, which also makes it worse. Panic attacks can have real physical symptoms, which makes them very hard to diagnose on your own. Some of them that the MayoClinic.org listed were feelings of heart attack, sense of impending doom or danger, fear of loss of control or death, rapid pounding heart rate, which a lot of times can be mistaken for a heart attack, sweating, trembling or shaking, shortness of breath or tightness in your throat, chills, hot flashes, nausea, abdominal cramping, chest pain, headaches, dizziness, lightheadedness or faintness, numbness or tingling sensation, feeling of unreality or detachment, and of course the need that you have to escape. They happen suddenly, and a lot of times you don't realize that they're going to happen. They don't give any kind of warning. The reason for panic attacks is your body is being put into a fight or flight mode. It's like you're being faced with this giant tiger. Comes out of nowhere. Your brain in the split second has to decide, do I run or do I fight? And there's not a whole lot of time to figure out anything else. Is that tiger real? Is that a picture of a tiger? Am I dreaming? One thing I know from firsthand experience, you do not want to confront somebody who's having a panic attack. You do not want to push them. You don't want to block their escape because you're going to get hurt. I don't care how small they are. It is exactly like they're being attacked by something dangerous, and they are going to go into fight mode. I didn't realize I was having panic attacks for a long time. I knew a lot of times I would get sick and I would get migraines and I would feel dizzy or nauseous when I was put into a fearful situation. But I just thought I was weak. I would try to push through whatever situation no matter what. I wasn't patient with myself at all. I wouldn't stop until I had a breakdown or the situation ended. There are times that I would actually look for an escape route and I would leave. That happened a lot more than the times that I was able to push through it. To give you an analogy, if you've never had a panic attack, it's like filling a balloon with water. I don't know if kids still do this today, but when I was a kid, we had massive water balloon fights. Most of the times they happen outside, which meant we didn't get grounded. So we would fill the balloons from the spigot. Now, when you're filling a balloon, the pressure is growing. And if you're not careful, that balloon is gonna pop. A lot of times we would get more wet from actually filling the water balloons than we ever did from the water balloon fight. So the trick is, You fill the balloon until it has the maximum amount of water. It's got to have enough water so it will explode when it hits anything. There's nothing more anticlimactic than to throw a water balloon and it just bounces. Looking back on it, I realized that soaking somebody was actually not the best part of it. The best part of it was that water balloon exploding. As a matter of fact, the very first thing that you would do if the water balloon bounced off somebody is you'd run up to it and you would stomp it until it exploded. I'm going to get back to that concept, but first let's take a quick sip. So let me give you a scenario. I mentioned last week, and I've mentioned quite a few times, that one of the biggest practice grounds for me to overcome my social phobias was walking around a mall. It was because there was tons and tons of people that I didn't know. I remember one particular situation. I was in the mall and I was having a panic attack, and I didn't realize that's what I was having. So I tried to push through, and I tried to push through, and it just got worse and worse and worse. It got to the point where I actually felt like I was going to pass out. When that would happen to me, that was an excuse for me to be able to run away. I felt like the pressure was building. It's like the water in that balloon. The pressure kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The harder I pushed, the more pressure I felt. Running away relieved that pressure, but the water was still in the water balloon. I don't remember how I discovered that I was having panic attacks. I know it couldn't have been that long ago because I was able to get on the internet and do some research. I found some great sites that explained how to go through with it, how to deal with them, and what to look for as symptoms. The first thing is that you got to turn off the water. Trying to force yourself to push through, or heaven forbid somebody else is putting pressure on you because they don't realize what's going on. A lot of times it's well-meaning because they just figure you just have to push through it. That's how my dad taught us to swim, threw us in the deep end. But the more that pressure builds, it's like that water just keeps flowing. You're only going to get worse and worse and worse the more pressure you put on yourself. And the next time, it's just going to hit that much harder. So that's the first thing, turn off the water. The next thing is that you have to have a release. Leaving the mall and escaping didn't really help me except in the moment, because that water was still in the water balloon. And the next time I would get into a social situation, especially if I went back to the mall, that water was still there and that pressure hit immediately and the panic attacks would start very soon after. Sometimes when we were filling these water balloons when I was a kid, we did get in trouble. And my mom or my dad or my big brother, whoever was looking out for us, would take the water balloons and they would just dump the water out of the balloons. That doesn't help. You actually have to feel that water balloon splat. That balloon has to burst. Whatever is causing that pressure has to be released, and it has to be released for good. So how does that happen? Well, in my experience, and I'm only talking about my experience and not giving any kind of psychological or medical advice, but the first step is to realize you're having a panic attack. And the next one is to be patient with yourself, to understand that it's okay. You're allowed to have this panic attack. I don't care who tells you that you're not. You are. You're fine. A lot of people go through them. There's nothing weird or different about you. It's okay to be scared. Once you get to the point where you can recognize that panic attack, then you can become that third person who's looking in objectively. And you can try to figure out, well, what is triggering this panic attack? For me, it was very obvious. It was being in crowds. It was feeling like I didn't have any escape route. I couldn't do anything but move forward into the situation that I was so afraid of. I'm getting kind of a dry mouth. Let's take another sip real quick and I'll continue. Okay, so you've gotten to the point where you realize that you're going through a panic attack. That relieves a lot of the stress because you're not afraid that there's something physically wrong with you. Next, again, you have to be okay with it. You have to give yourself a little bit of self-love. It really helps if you have somebody that you trust that you can explain this to and they understand so they can be looking out for it too. Another thing that triggered my phobias was loud noises. I had this one person that I went to see. She was a singer and she saw me sitting out in the crowd. She knew me well enough to recognize that I was having a panic attack. I didn't even realize it. I was in the moment and wasn't thinking at all. She got off stage, came over to me, and asked me, "Phil, is the loud noise bothering you?" And that's all it took for me to realize it. It really helps to have somebody else that makes you feel that you're okay. Because with phobias and fears, man, we just feel like we have to hide them from people. So what I learned to do is when I recognized the panic attacks, I was in that mall, I would say, it's okay for me to just take a couple of minutes. I would actually go out to my car and I would sit there. I would listen to music. I would do whatever it took to change the subject. As time passed, I got better at having counter triggers, but that's not the way it started. It started with me just getting myself to feel relaxed, get my mind off the situation, stop the repetitive cycle of feedback that was going on in my head. Once I got calmed down, then I could go back into the mall. Like I talked about last week, I gave myself that 30 minutes again to feel comfortable, or I would let myself go home without any retribution or condemnation from myself. You know, a lot of times I would drink a cup of coffee and that helped. Hey, that's a reminder. Let's take a sip. Now, I'm not saying that every panic attack means that you're phobic. It does mean that you're afraid of something. That's what causes it. But I don't know if it means that you are so afraid of something that it's an actual phobia. So I wouldn't worry about that. Just focus in on the panic attack itself. Sometimes it could happen if you have to give a speech in front of a crowd, or you have to see your boss, or you've screwed up some way and you have to go, see your boss. For me, recognizing that I had a panic attack, getting good at dealing with that, relieving the pressure, helped me to go a long way in being able to analyze the fears and the phobias and figure out a game plan to step by step overcome them. I didn't completely get rid of the panic attacks. I don't have the phobias anymore, but I have recognized that I do have panic attacks in those same situations. Nice thing is, I have those counter triggers that once I recognize a panic attack starting to happen, I can squelch it like that. That is a really handy skill to have. Once I've gotten good at it, I can recognize it in other people, and I know different things to do to help them. Sometimes it's just observe them from a distance. Don't let them know that you're observing them, but just kind of watch them and help them as they're moving through their situation any way you can to relieve the stress or change the subject. That's huge. If you can get them laughing, their whole world is going to change. The more that a person is able to have control over those panic attacks and release the pressure, notice I didn't say relieve the pressure, release the pressure, the less those panic attacks are going to happen, or at least when they do happen, they'll be less severe. Some of those counter triggers that I use are basically just talking to myself, letting myself know that there's no real danger here. It's okay that you're responding. It's just your body reacting to the situation. Also, because my phobias were centered around social situations, I remind myself that I'm awesome around people. I enjoy people. I enjoy making them feel good. I enjoy conversation. I enjoy strangers. I'm great in social situations. And also that I've overcome all of that. So this really is just residue from it. Tactile sensations can also help. I used to have this little rock that I found. It was really smooth and it was kind of dipped in the middle, and it was basically a touchstone. I carried that thing around with me everywhere. If I started to feel anxious for any reason, I would just reach in my pocket, pull it out, and I would just start rubbing it. That smooth sensation was a reminder that I was okay. Music also helps. I use that a lot. Find some music that makes you feel at peace. Something funny. Go watch a funny movie, or just really anything that you can get absorbed in that's going to change your outlook. If you can just break that feedback, break that cycle, then you can come back to it and you're going to feel refreshed. You're going to look at it a different way, and you're going to be victorious with overcoming whatever fear is causing it. So if I could leave you with one thought, it's not a big deal. A lot of people go through it. If I were to stomp on your foot, I would expect your foot to hurt. I wouldn't hold it against you, and neither should you. It's okay. Give yourself a break. Speaking of breaks, let's take one last sip. Well, I hope this helps somebody. Put in the comments what you think about this. Have you had panic attacks? Have you overcome them? Or have they caused you problems in your life? Reach out to me. The best way to reach me is probably through a comment. Just let me know that you want to reach me, or my email address is right there on the information for my YouTube channel. But reach out to me. I'll get on the phone with you. Talking about it with somebody who's overcome fears and phobias and panic attacks really helps, and I want to help as many people as I can. That's why I do this. If you like this video, take a look around. I've got a bunch of videos that I talk about ways that I have overcome adversities in life or have grown. Other people have taught them to me, or I've gotten information that they have put out there that has helped me change my life, and I just want to pay it forward. If you did like this video, please give it a like. Maybe share it with somebody that you think would enjoy it or it would help. Also think about subscribing and hitting that little ringy-dingy thing so you're notified next time I make a video. And as always, no matter what tune that life plays you, always find your groove. I enjoyed talking with you today. I'll see you next week.